So Costas, one of the things I'm interested in is when we talk about innovation, one of the challenges I think businesses have today is the world is just moving so fast. You almost don't get a chance to catch your breath, and the next thing's already come along and the next thing's happening, everything's so disposable. So how does a company keep up with itself and with the marketplace to maintain some sort of competitive advantage? Because most sectors these days are moving pretty fast. It almost doesn't matter which one you're in.
Yeah, so I completely agree, and it is speeding up. It's even sped up dramatically within my career, and I've only been around not even 20 years doing this professionally. The answer is, of course, if you know how to differentiate, let's take that as a given, is that you don't lock yourself into expensive assets, stuff that can't move or can't change. If you build a factory, and if you build a factory to create, let's say, a new food product, for example, don't assume that food product will be relevant 18 months from now. Assume that whatever asset you put in that factory floor, that line, you need to be able to replace bits and pieces of it very quickly. And actually, I still hear conversations on, particularly say, following on the projects we do with clients, which is all about getting quickly to what is the new innovation going to be. They're still talking about then keeping that product unchanged for 4, 5, 6 years and investing in high-speed equipment, which will allow them to do massive volumes, actually knowing those volumes, by the time you hit those, that's probably also, let's say, peak demand, and you'll be going down very quickly after that. So when you make investments, which you will need to do in almost any category you innovate in, make sure you do it in a way which remains flexible at its highest possible degree, because even if you don't want it to change, it will change. The world around you will change faster than you think it will. And it's always easier to change a small part of your business, of your operational system, rather than to have literally to scrap everything and start all over.
So really getting a business, build it to change, build it to be adaptable and flexible and almost, bits.
And assume it changes so quickly that by the time you have your new things in place, it will already be different from when you scoped it out. And that goes all the way down to the people you hire. When you hire a particular person to do X, well, you can presume that by the time they're in place, their job will have turned into X plus, or Y, or even Z. So it's not just the assets, as in stuff bolted to the floor, but it's also the people you bring on board. They will also have to basically be as flexible with you, understanding that whatever job they were hired for is probably not the job they'll have 5 to 10 years from now, if they're even still with the business.
And how does a business put any sort of KPIs in place in that kind of environment? So when you're going in, you're starting to innovate. Obviously, eventually, you'll know whether something works in the marketplace. But as you're going through that process and those iterations, how do you have any KPIs against those to be able to measure anything?
Do you mean, say, KPIs for example, people on the team?
Yeah. And just making sure that in some way. Because however creative you want to be, there has to be some process at some point or something that things are measured against.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What sort of things can you put in place?
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question, and it's almost like the million-dollar question in this new corporate world. KPI should probably more, because you're looking for change and you want to be benefiting the change, of the change, probably the KPI should also be related to change, rather to say fixed levels and say you need to do a minimum of this or you need to do exactly that. It's like, actually a very simple one is how do you guarantee you're always out there with new stuff? Well, that's probably by relating the revenue coming into your business from the products that have been launched recently to a KPI. So if you say to someone in an innovation team or in a marketing team or anywhere actually, 40% of what we make our money on should have been launched in the past 3 years, then you have a massive KPI for people to keep refreshing their portfolio. And of course what will happen is, in some cases, they refresh it for the sake of refreshing it, because that's the KPI you gave them. But it's much better than not refreshing it at all, because then you'll know you'll be too late coming up with new stuff when you actually need it. And that's kind of also the inefficiency of always changing, is sometimes you change without it being entirely necessary. On the other hand, you can get lucky and you change it just ahead of when it became really necessary, and then you're the first one out there doing it.